We were together for about a year or so before I decided that she was the one. One day after work, I spent all of 4 hours at the local jewelry store trying to pick out the most beautiful ring I could afford. When I found the one that was absolutely perfect for her, I rushed home to prepare the most romantic dinner I could possibly make, complete with the red linen tablecloths, candles, and a $150 bottle of red wine. Everything was absolutely perfect. I even snapped a picture of the table because I was so impressed with myself. She got home around 9. I greeted her at the door, kissed her hand, and led her to the table.
"What's all this?"
she asked. "Only the most beautiful for the most beautiful," I said, smiling. She blushed, which caused me to smile even more. I got up to get the plates I had kept in the oven to stay warm. I placed them on the table, poured our wine, and sat down. Everything was going great. We talked, we laughed, she complimented me on my cooking. After about 20 minutes, I thought it was the right time. I said, "We all need that person who can be true to you," I continued. "We've known each other for a long time, been through thick and thin, and I don't want this ever to end." I got down on one knee, withdrew the ring box from my pocket, and said, "Will you marry me?" She looked surprised at first, then a smile cracked across her face. I was so excited. This was it. My life was complete. She began to open her mouth. I was on the verge of tears with anticipation. But what began coming out of her mouth was not the long-awaited yes, nor was it a no. It was a laugh. Not a happy moment laugh. More like someone just told you a good joke laugh. After she was done, she looked down at me and said,
"Oh man, that was a good one."
She then sniffled and said,
"So, how much did you pay for this wine? It's really good."
I was still sitting there on my knees with the ring box open. I didn't know what to think. Surely no one would laugh at someone who had just spent $500 on a dinner and $3,000 on a ring to show them how much they cared. I got caught up in a blind madness. Something took over my senses, and I lost control. I began laughing uncontrollably, tears running down my face. I grabbed the nearest steak knife on the table and shouted, "Come here, you fucking bitch!" As I yanked her out of her chair, I threw her on the ground and I drove my knife over and over again into her chest. I reached my hand into her mangled torso. I grabbed her heart and ripped it out right before her eyes. Looking down at her, I could see that she was still alive. Her mouth was moving as if she was trying to say something, and her eyes were fixed on me. I noticed a tear run down the side of her face. "Baby, don't cry," I said kindly. "Everybody's gotta die sometime." Before long, consciousness had passed from her face. I placed her heart on a dinner plate and put it in the fridge. I looked down at her body and thought, now we can be together forever. I lifted her up and walked her into my bedroom, where we ended the night like a good couple should. This time without her complaining about pain and how her body doesn't bend that way. She was just perfect. I fell asleep with her in my arms. When I woke up, I noticed how cold she had gotten. In the better lighting, I noticed what a mess the steak knife had made of her once flawless body. I picked her up, walked her into the bathroom, and placed her in the bathtub. I let the shower run on her to clean the blood off. I watched the water flow with shades of red. Letting the water run, I mopped up the mess that was left on the floor from last night. I looked at her body laying limp in the bathtub. Some of the dried blood needed some scrubbing to come completely off. Her body was now perfect looking apart from the 50+ stab wounds in her torso. No matter, though, nothing a needle and thread couldn't fix. I spent the rest of the day making her my own personal piece of heaven. Every day from then on, we would dance, make love, watch TV, and cuddle. It was perfect. When she began to show signs of decomposition, I would do my best to keep her looking as beautiful as she deserved. I would leave her waiting for me in bed, just waiting for me to come home. I would have a rush of happiness whenever I would see her lovely face as I walked through the door. I picked up a heated blanket to wrap around her abdomen and thighs to keep her parts warm. One day, I was really missing her, so I left work early. When I walked into my room, hoping to see my darling's lovely face waiting for me like she always is, my bed was empty. Impossible, I thought as I scoured the house looking for her. I sat on the couch with my head in my hands, trying to figure out what could have happened. Would someone just come in and steal her? Just then I heard a loud crash come from the kitchen. I rushed to find a figure hunched over, standing in front of the fridge with a broken plate at its feet. "Who are you?" I shouted. It turned around smiling. It was her. She was holding her heart, giggling at me. No, that's impossible, I yelled, as I began backing up and running towards the front door. The door was locked. I twisted and pulled at the lock, but it was no use. It was as if some supernatural force was holding it in place. I turned around to find another way out, and she was standing right in front of me, brandishing her heart in her right hand, grinning and laughing in the most horrifying way you can imagine. She tore open one of her stitches and placed it inside. "Now's my chance," I thought as I attempted to rush past her, but I couldn't move more than 3 feet before I felt a sharp pain in my chest, which stopped me dead in my tracks. I looked down and saw her hand, which had been forced through my ribs and was grabbing my heart. I looked up at her, smiling with those cold, dead eyes. She placed her other hand on my neck and shoved me into the door. I looked down at my chest and saw a huge gaping hole. As I lay there, I felt the life slowly leaving my body, a victim of my own creation. The last thing I saw was her ripping pieces out of my heart with her teeth. My vision began to tunnel greater and greater. This is it, I thought as I looked at the shrinking image that was my life. It was almost as if I was falling. I am falling. I looked around and saw fire. The smell of burning brimstone became stronger as I descended. I knew, after what I'd done, my afterlife was not going to be a place of hope and no pain, or with perfect skies and no rain. I hit the ground on my back. Everything went black for a second. When I came to, I looked up and I saw her standing over me.
"I've been waiting for you,"
she said, as she extended her hand as if she was going to help me up. I kicked and flailed in an effort to retreat. I got myself up and began running, but quickly stopped at the edge of a cliff, which at the bottom was nothing but magma and what looked like people screaming. I turned around to see her standing right there. She's going to push me in, isn't she? I thought. I've wronged her, and now she's the one to push me into hell. I got down on my knees and I begged for my soul. Please, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to be together forever. She lifted me up by my neck, held me to her face and said,
"What about what I wanted?"
in an almost monstrous voice before shoving me over the cliff, catching me by my shirt. I could feel the heat of hell on my back. I should have known the price of evil. It hurt to know that I belonged here. Shame pulsed through my heart from the things I had done to her. Please, I'm sorry. I'll do whatever you want me to do. She yanked me back and said,
"Well then, I grant you a chance."
Just then there was a flash of light. I was back at my house, in my bed next to her. It was a dream, I said to myself, but then she sprung alive and said,
"You only hoped,"
followed by a hideous laugh. I looked down at my chest and saw the hole where my heart used to be. She was still laying, laughing hysterically. I stood up and held my stomach in pain. I've never felt so hungry. I stumbled into the kitchen and started shoving whatever I could down my throat. I needed more. None of this was working. I looked back and saw her standing by the door holding 2 fairly large kitchen knives. I walked over to her and she handed one to me as she pranced out into the front lawn. I followed her outside. She then grabbed my hand and began walking me down the street. We stopped in front of a building with a sign out front that read, St. James Cathedral. She started to walk towards the front door, motioning me to follow. I stood there as she kicked the massive door off its hinges. There was a wedding going on. She rushed in with inhuman speed, running the knife through people like a hot saw through butter. I watched the masses of people fall. The smell of blood sent me into a frenzy, and before I knew it, I was rushing in, effortlessly ripping and tearing through flesh. I kept my mouth open, hoping some blood would land in my mouth. I hacked off a man's arm and began ripping chunks of flesh off with my teeth. Such a relieving feeling, having warm flesh and blood rest in my stomach. I made a beast out of myself. It would appear that I just lost my mind, but it feels like I've just gained more control than I ever had. In between bites, I was restlessly swinging the knife with my other arm through flesh and bone with terrific speed. The bride and groom stood there holding on to each other. We both walked up to them and with one swift synchronized movement sliced their heads from their shoulders. I took the veil and the ring from the bride and placed it on her head and finger. I then handed her the flowers. The priest marrying the previous bride and groom was hiding in the back corner of the room. I dragged him over to the altar, stood opposite of my darling, and motioned the priest to start the ceremony. He was shaking as he spoke. Do you take this man in death for the rest of your unnatural life?
Yes, I do,
she said gleefully. The priest went on. Do you take this woman in death for the rest of your unnatural life? I do, I said through bloodied teeth. Then I now pronounce you man and wife, he said as he dropped his Bible and ran for the exit. I looked into her black, enchanting eyes. Until the end, I said as we shared our first kiss as husband and wife. We walked out of the church holding hands and lived happily ever after.